Looking down at me, suffering on the hospital bed, my husband coldly declared,
I'm going on a trip now.
Huh?
You're 9 weeks pregnant, right? Well, morning sickness is something you can handle on your own. I don't want to be tied down during that time. I just had a place I wanted to go. Well then, take care.
My husband left the room in a brisk manner, leaving me behind. Wait. Tears welled up involuntarily, and I endured the suffering all by myself. After that, with no contact from my husband whatsoever, I spent 3 anxious days. Then my mother-in-law rushed into the hospital room and yelled, My son! My son! He was rushed to the emergency room and is unconscious! What? What does that mean? Carrying my big belly, I headed to the hospital where my husband was taken, and there, an unimaginable scene unfolded before me. My name is Mia. I'm a 28-year-old housewife entering my 2nd year of marriage this year. I am currently pregnant with our first child. I met my husband Matteo through a mutual friend, and I was drawn to his easygoing personality, so I asked him out. Matteo is a diligent employee at a regular company, and he takes good care of me. When we found out about the pregnancy, he was overjoyed and ecstatic.
Congratulations! I'll take a day off work tomorrow. Let's celebrate.
That's too much. We need to be responsible since we'll have expenses from now on, so please, focus on your work. Although I replied like that, I honestly felt happy to see him so excited. In the end, he treated me to a homemade meal over the weekend that was too much to finish. And so my pregnancy journey began. Since then, Matteo would buy multiple amulets for safe delivery. And even before my belly grew big, he would place his hand on it every morning.
May you be born healthy,
he would pray. I had a lot of anxieties being pregnant for the first time, but seeing Matteo acting a little out of the ordinary like that made me feel better. Around the 7th week of pregnancy, I started to become somewhat sensitive to food smells. One day, despite having no appetite, I thought I should eat for nutrition, but when I forced myself to eat, my stomach felt extremely nauseous, and I rushed to the bathroom. In my foggy state of mind, I understood. Morning sickness had begun. When I finally calmed down and returned from the bathroom, Matteo, with a face ever paler than mine, was worried about me, so I couldn't help but laugh. Morning sickness symptoms weren't too severe yet, but despite Matteo being busy with work, he took care of me and showed me kindness. Even when he came home tired from work, he would talk only about me and our unborn child, and I genuinely thought he was a great husband from the bottom of my heart. However, the atmosphere at our home gradually started to change. There came a time when he would take out his smartphone more often, and when I caught a glimpse of the screen, it seemed like he was having exchanges with someone. It's Matteo we're talking about. It couldn't possibly be an affair, right? While feeling a slight sense of unease, I believed that at the time. However, as the days went by, the frequency of his exchanges on his smartphone increased. He even started taking out his phone during our conversations. One night, unable to sleep due to the effects of morning sickness, Matteo quietly got up, gazing at his phone screen, and left the bedroom. And there were times when he didn't return for a long time. I used to think that he went out because he was considerate of me sleeping, but the unease within me kept growing steadily. By the time I entered the 9th week of pregnancy, the symptoms of morning sickness had worsened, and I started experiencing headaches and ringing in my ears. It was no longer a situation where I simply felt anxious about Matteo's actions. Is the smell of food always this nauseating? I couldn't eat enough during meals, and even drinking water made my stomach feel queasy, causing me to vomit. With days like that continuing, my body gradually became unable to function properly, so Matteo drove me to the hospital, and I was immediately put on an IV drip.
Your morning sickness symptoms are severe. It would be better for you to stay in the hospital until your condition improves.
I was able to go home that day, but the next day I was admitted to the hospital right away. Matteo expressed his concern for me, but he had a serious look on his face as if he was thinking about something. The next morning, after preparing for my hospital stay, Matteo drove me to the hospital again. Once I finished the necessary preparations in the assigned hospital room, Matteo said something unbelievable.
I'm going on a trip now.
Huh? I was so shocked that I couldn't find the words to speak. Before I had time to ask him where he was going or what he wanted, Matteo briskly left the hospital room. Leaving me behind for a trip? Is this some kind of joke? That's what I thought, and once I calmed down, I tried calling him, but there was no answer. As I became deeply troubled, the symptoms of morning sickness worsened. I could hardly eat any meals, and the headaches were so severe that I even thought I might die. I tried calling him multiple times, wishing that Matteo would at least be there, but for the next 3 days I couldn't reach him at all, and I was overcome with immense anxiety. My parents lived quite far away, so they couldn't come to visit me easily, and I was left to struggle with pain and uncertainty all by myself. In the midst of that, my mother-in-law came to visit me. Long time no see, Mia. I heard you've been going through a tough time. Are you okay? I'm managing somehow. Thank you for coming all this way. Although I replied like that, I couldn't hide the worry in my expression. You look a bit pale. Is something bothering you? Actually, Matteo went on a trip. It's been 3 days and I haven't been able to contact him. Well, what on earth? That child? My mother-in-law widened her eyes in surprise and immediately made a call to Matteo together as we went to the conversation room. I had thought it would be useless because he hadn't answered the phone this morning, but it seemed Matteo responded right away. Matteo, where are you right now? Mia is extremely worried, you know. What are you thinking? She's speaking quietly in the hospital, but I can tell that Priscilla is sternly reprimanding him. Now it seems Matteo has started talking, but I can't hear his voice from where I am. Matteo seems to be explaining at length, and my mother-in-law is listening attentively, nodding along. After a while, my mother-in-law, Understood, I will talk to her. With just that response, she hung up the phone and turned to me. What did he say? Well, there are some circumstances right now that I can't discuss, but when Matteo comes back, he will explain it himself. So for now, focus on resting and taking care of your health. My mother-in-law said that while avoiding eye contact, looking awkward. What do you mean? Was it a trip? I asked various questions, but I was only given vague answers, and I couldn't get a clear response. Afterward, my mother-in-law took care of my surroundings and left the hospital room, showing me kindness. Feeling even more anxious with the unsatisfactory answers, I couldn't sleep and spent my time on the bed, lost in thought. Then, after about 3 hours, the screen of my phone in silent mode lit up. Matteo? For a moment, I had hope, but it was my mother-in-law's name that appeared on my screen. Mother-in-law, about earlier. Before I could finish my greeting, my mother-in-law shouted in a panicked voice. Matteo! He was transported to the hospital and is unconscious. Transported? Anyway, I'll come back immediately. As the call ended, I was overwhelmed and approached a nurse who was nearby. My husband is in critical condition. I need to be discharged right away. The nurse was surprised by my urgency, but when she looked at the IV tube still attached to my arm, Well, not right away, she stammered in her response. While we were calling for a doctor and explaining the situation, my mother-in-law arrived shortly after. In the end, we were able to obtain permission to leave on the condition that my mother-in-law would accompany me, and the two of us rushed out of the hospital. It seemed that Matteo had been transported to a hospital quite far away, but my mother-in-law provided a car and drove at high speed on the highway. During that time, there was no conversation between the two of us, and I could only pray. What on earth is happening, Matteo? God, please help him. We drove for hours with hardly any breaks, and finally we arrived at the hospital. We quickly exited the car, inquired about the room with the guidance, and hurriedly made our way there. As I practically jumped into the room and opened the door, there before me on the bed was Matteo sleeping, and a young woman clinging to him and crying. Seeing that woman, my mind went blank. My mother-in-law was frozen by my side, just as shocked. Who is she? Finally managing to force out my voice, I received a shocking answer. I'm Karen, Matteo's girlfriend. Girlfriend? How? The woman, while crying, still sent me provocative glances. She must know that Matteo is married and that I am his wife, but now was not the time to focus on that. I rushed to the bed. What happened to Matteo? Actually, Matteo and I were on a trip, but he got into an accident along the way. Upon hearing those words, I became convinced. Matteo was indeed having an affair, and the person he was exchanging messages with on his phone was her. I turned my gaze to my mother-in-law standing beside me, who wore an equally surprised expression but didn't say anything. Just then the doctor arrived, said that there were no serious injuries to his body, but that he had hit his head hard, and that there was a 50-50 chance that he would regain consciousness. Knowing that there was a possibility Matteo might not wake up, my consciousness drifted even further away. Despite feeling disappointed in his act of infidelity, I still loved my husband deeply. Holding his hand, I prayed from the bottom of my heart for him to regain consciousness. And then, to my astonishment, Matteo's hand moved slightly and he returned the grip. Acting on instinct, I tapped his shoulder and called his name repeatedly, and Matteo slowly opened his eyelids. It was a miraculous moment as he regained consciousness. Ah, thank you, God. When my mother-in-law went to call the doctor and have Matteo's condition checked, it seemed there were no particular issues, so she was allowed to stay with him. As my mother-in-law and I sat on the chairs next to Matteo, the woman who was his affair partner awkwardly moved her chair away and retreated to the corner of the room. I'm glad you're okay. I was so worried.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But why did you leave me behind? He hesitated for a moment, but then resignedly began explaining what happened over the past 3 days.
Your morning sickness was getting really severe, right? So I went to a spiritual hotspot to pray for your recovery.
Prayer? I was taken aback by his unexpected words, but he didn't seem like he was lying.
I heard there's a powerful spiritual hotspot deep in the mountains that is believed to be effective for wishing for loved ones. But the road leading there is not well maintained, and it's like a hidden place, so it takes time to reach. That's why I had to leave the hospital quickly after you were admitted.
What? If that's the case, then why didn't you tell me?
There are rules, you see. To make a wish at that power spot, I must not contact the person I'm wishing for.
At that moment, I glanced at my mother-in-law. I'm sorry. I heard it from Matteo over the phone, but he strongly warned me not to say anything either. So that's how it was. I appreciate that he went with good intentions, but there's something I can't forgive. But even so, you didn't have to go with your affair partner.
Affair?
He responded with a clueless tone, as if he didn't understand what I was talking about. Thinking he was pretending, I turned my gaze to that young woman sitting in the corner of the room, and Matteo, too, followed my gaze and looked at her.
Huh? Why are you...
He said with a bewildered expression on his face. Huh? Both I and my mother-in-law exclaimed in surprise and widened our eyes. The woman looked embarrassed and shrunk back slightly. Who is she?
She's a member of the same project team at work, right, Karen?
Upon being called Karen, she gathered her resolve and walked up to us. I'm Karen. I'm sorry. It's a lie that I'm Matteo's girlfriend. Surprised, we listened as Karen began to explain the situation. According to her story, Karen admired Matteo, her senior colleague at work, and over time, that admiration turned into romantic feelings. Despite knowing he was married, she continued to message him outside of work hours, disguising it as work-related discussions. It turns out that Karen was indeed the person he was exchanging messages with on his smartphone. However, her attempts were in vain, as Matteo showed no interest in any woman other than his wife, completely unaware of her advances. In fact,
asking questions even after work hours, she's so dedicated.
She was even praised for her work ethic. It's a typical response from Matteo, who seems insensitive to personal relationships, but it turns out Karen was only valued as a co-worker. So Karen devised a plan. Karen was the one who revealed the famous spiritual hotspot to Mateo. She knew that Mateo was concerned about my morning sickness and that he had strong religious beliefs, so she thought that if she told him about a powerful spiritual hotspot, he would definitely go. So through colleagues at work, Karen spread rumors to Mateo. As expected, the plan worked, and Mateo quickly set off after admitting me to the hospital. When Karen received a message on her phone that he would be taking some time off from work, she became convinced that he was going to the spiritual hotspot. With that certainty in mind, she waited for him there, secretly following his every move. If everything went according to plan, she would appear before Mateo the moment he arrived at the spiritual hotspot. It's fate, isn't it? It seems she had plans to say that and perform a prayer for a good relationship. However, Mateo slipped and hit his head in the mountains, losing consciousness. In a state of panic, she made an emergency call for help. It seems that the hospital tried to contact Mateo's family, so Karen instructed them to call his mother instead of me. Karen knew that I was hospitalized, and she had witnessed Mateo speaking with his mother on the phone just before he slipped. Based on that, she believed that his mother would come immediately if informed. If Mateo wakes up, there's a chance he might turn towards me, Karen said, holding on to a faint glimmer of hope. With that in mind, she lied to us, claiming, I am his girlfriend. I'm so sorry for putting you, Mateo, in danger because of me. And on top of that, I lied. I was completely out of my mind. I'm the worst. Karen finished her explanation and apologized again, shedding tears. I was completely stunned by the outrageous story, and I didn't know what to say. Both Mateo and my mother-in-law had the same blank expression on their faces. I thought she was a person who had been involved in stalker-like behavior and had outrageous thoughts, but now I can see that she deeply regrets her actions. Honestly, I was surprised. I want you to let go of Mateo already, but thanks to you, my husband was saved. Thank you. Indeed. Regardless of the motive, you are our son's savior. Allow me to express my gratitude. My mother-in-law and I sincerely expressed our gratitude. Karen seemed surprised for a moment when she was thanked, and then she bowed her head multiple times. Mateo appeared uncomfortable and awkward, but he followed us and spoke up.
I'm truly grateful for your help, but I'm sorry. I can't see you as anything more than a junior colleague, and I can't have any interest in anyone other than Mia.
He said it decisively. No, I don't deserve to be thanked. I'm sorry for being selfish, but I'm really glad. Karen continued to apologize, shedding more tears, and she also apologized to Mateo for lying. She was simply overjoyed that his life was saved. Afterward, the three of us comforted Karen and left the hospital room when things settled down. Fortunately, Mateo was able to be discharged without any lasting effects. I also stayed in the hospital for about 10 days, and my morning sickness symptoms subsided, allowing me to be safely discharged. Mateo continued to worry and take care of me every day, and with the stability of the second trimester, I was able to live a calm life. Most importantly, the anxiety about my husband's infidelity disappeared. And then I safely gave birth while holding Mateo's hand. The next morning, still awkwardly holding our baby, Mateo came to the hospital room.
I'm so glad the baby was born safely. Now we need to go make a wish for the child's well-being.
He said that and began earnestly searching for a place. I was somewhat amazed by Mateo's devoutness. Remember this. Being by our child's side is the best medicine, more than any wish. I gently advised him. Mateo had a bewildered look on his face.
But I don't have anything I can do.
You were hospitalized too, so you understand, right? Upon hearing that, he nodded vigorously.
Ah, yes. I certainly felt anxious being alone.
It seems like he finally understood. There will be many challenges in raising our first child from now on. Nevertheless, I am confident that everything will be alright as long as I am with him, I thought, and I embraced our newborn baby.
Wow, those are really terrible warts and blemishes, huh? It's like you've become a witch at this point, Mom. My son said as he looked at my face. Then, my husband muttered under his breath, "The witch of warts and blemishes." Yeah, that's it. Good naming, Dad. My son burst into laughter while enjoying his evening beer. Don't show your ugly face on my big day. The witch of warts and blemishes. Don't come to my wedding. Got it? My own son labeled me as a witch. I couldn't find any words to express my sadness anymore. My name is Sarah, 56 years old. My husband is Nicholas, 57 years old. We live together with our son Matt, who is 28 years old. My son recently got engaged. His partner is Jenny, who works at the same company. Lately, I've been reminiscing a lot about our old family life. We used to be a close-knit family. We often went on trips and shopping together. I remember my son looking back and waving his hand during school events. I remember my husband holding my hand while climbing mountains. Everything was sparkling with beautiful memories. That's why I've worked hard until now. I took care of household chores while working outside to support my kind husband and son. Although my husband didn't earn much, my son expressed his desire to attend a private school. I helped out a nearby farm in the morning and worked at the farmer's market until the evening. I worked hard for the sake of my family. It was a job where I exposed my entire body to the sun from the morning. My son successfully entered the desired school and even got into a prestigious university. I was happy about my son's achievements, but the damage to my own skin was significant. Finally, my son became a working professional, and I returned to being a housewife. One day, an incident occurred that completely changed the attitude of my husband and son. It happened so suddenly. Huh? What's that? One day, as I preparing breakfast, my son suddenly let out a horrified voice. Huh? What's wrong, Matt? I looked around the table, thinking that maybe there was a bug. Then, when he said, "No, it's not on the table. It's on your face, Mom." What? Is there something on my face? I wondered if I accidentally got something on my face while cooking. As I touched my face, thinking about it, Matt said, "It won't come off, right? It's a blemish, isn't it?" Then my husband lifted his face from the newspaper and stared at me. You're right, Matt. Come to think of it, you also have warts on your neck. It's disgusting, my husband said in a low voice, filled with malice, and I silently stared at him. I will never forget the twisted expressions they both directed at me at that moment. From that day on, they continued to bully me, perhaps getting carried away. Once I discovered it, I can't ignore them anymore. It's like a fraud, right? You used to be beautiful when you were younger. Yeah, Mom. I remember when I was a kid, you were beautiful. I used to be happy when you come to my school events. Because you were beautiful. Yeah, that's right. That's why I helped you with various things and carried your stuff. It's really such a drastic change. It's nothing but a fraud, isn't it, son? They continued to make these remarks, escalating their bullying towards me. It became so hurtful to hear these words every night that my mental state suffered, and I ended up staying at home most of the time, except for work. Even on days when I didn't go out, I started putting on makeup. My husband continued to insult me, calling it a fraud, while my son further escalated the situation. How did it even get this bad? They look so awful. Mom, at this point, you're practically a witch, my son said as he looked at my face. Then my husband muttered under his breath, "The witch of warts and blemishes." Yeah, that's a good naming, Dad. My son burst out laughing while enjoying his evening beer. And so, my nickname became the Witch of Warts and Blemishes. I was no longer addressed by my name or even as Mom. Even for family members, it was too cruel. That's not a very nice way to address me, you know. I resisted and tried to say something back in a weak voice. Huh? But it's the truth. Huh. They burst into laughter, and I couldn't get through to them. Bothered by it, I decided to visit the dermatologist. It's likely caused by years of excessive sun exposure due to your work. But as you age, everyone can develop warts and blemishes. That's what the doctor told me, and that was the end of it. If it's just a result of aging, then there's nothing I can do about it. I exposed myself to the sun not for my own sake, but for both of you. With a sense of helplessness, I wet my pillow night after night. Now, amidst all this, my son is about to get married. Even during such a joyful time, our family routine remains unchanged. After thoroughly insulting me, my son proudly boasts in a loud voice, "Jenny is known as a beauty even within the company, you know. I mean, I fell in love with her at first sight." According to my son, his fiancée Jenny is a beautiful woman who was even a homecoming queen, but she has never come to our house for introductions. I can't let the witch meet her. What if it leads to the cancellation of the wedding? That would be a problem. That's why only my husband has met her face to face. Well, she was a stunning person. Oh, by the way, for the wedding, you better not come, okay? Suddenly, my husband made an unbelievable statement. It's disrespectful to show your dirty face on a day like that. Besides, only humans attend weddings. You're right, Dad. There's no seat for the witch. Oh, I really want to cut that with her. What kind of handicap is it to have a witch as a family member? My husband and son started hurling abusive remarks at me one after another. Because of the warts and blemishes, I was denied the opportunity to attend my own son's wedding. I could only bow my head in front of the two of them, who laughed crudely. On the day of the wedding, I found myself alone in a room without my husband or son, looking at myself in the mirror. This tan was the result of my effort to support my family. And yet, to be treated so coldly by my own family. Even the memories of the happiness we once had together were denied. What have I been striving so hard for all this time? Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at myself in the mirror. At that moment, the phone in the house suddenly rang. When I answered it, it was my husband. "Sarah, please, come to the venue." I could hear the desperation in my husband's voice. What's going on? You said there's no seat for the witch. I've arranged something. Please, come right away. My husband's voice, on the verge of tears, echoed through the phone. Without fully understanding the situation, I headed to the venue for the time being. When I opened the door, I saw my husband and son on all fours. The surrounding guests were in an uproar. Confronted with this bizarre scene, I was dumbfounded. unable to find a rational explanation. Is this some kind of ritual where the groom and his father kneel before the bride's family? No way. I quickly changed my mind and called out to my husband. Hey, what are you doing?
Sarah!
My husband, still on all fours, turned his face towards me and called my name with a sorrowful voice. How long has it been since my husband called my name? It feels like it's been at least 10 years. But before I could dwell on the thought, a woman's voice resounded. So, what's the reason you couldn't bring your wife? The voice belonged to a woman, standing tall and imposing.
Well,
my husband visibly flinched at her voice, and then he spoke in a small voice. I can't hear you. Say it louder. If it's not a ridiculous reason, let it resound throughout the venue. The woman raised her voice even louder. My husband cried out in a voice on the verge of tears.
Because my wife has blemishes on her face. It wouldn't be suitable for a celebratory occasion.
Blemishes? You mean because of that? She's not suitable being here today? The woman widened her eyes and angrily retorted. Excuse me? I called out to the woman this time, trying to get her attention. The woman turned towards me and then approached me, grabbing my face with her hands. She was a beautiful woman. Startled by her sudden action and fierce demeanor, I let out a small voice. However, the woman quickly turned on her heel and returned to my husband and son, and standing tall again. It's about your wife's blemishes, right? I just saw them now. It's really not a big deal at all. The woman remained in that position and turned her gaze towards the bride, standing behind her. Jenny, get a makeup wipe. She demanded the bride to hand over a makeup wipe. Judging by her age, she was probably the bride's mother. Naturally, the bride didn't have a makeup wipe since she was wearing a wedding dress. Feeling sorry, someone nearby who seemed to be a bridesmaid handed a tissue to the bride's mother. She took it and swiftly wiped her cheek with it. Now, take a look. My husband and son lifted their heads.
Sorry. We're sorry. We apologize.
Both of them bowed down again. On the face of the woman, who appeared to be the bride's mother, there were blemishes even more prominent than mine. Having blemishes is something that can happen to anyone as they age, you know. You are complaining about something like that. It's people like you with low-level heads who shouldn't show up. That's what I'm saying. The bride's mother shouted. My husband and son remained crawling on the floor, shrinking ever further. It's true that my Jenny is beautiful. She's my pride and joy. But you know, even Jenny might gain weight after having children. With aging, wrinkles and blemishes might appear, right? And yet, Matt, you abandoned even the slightest bit of gratitude towards your mother, who raised you despite her blemishes, didn't you? I can't possibly believe that someone like you would cherish my precious daughter. At that moment, a woman among the attendees stood up after hearing the bride's mother's furious speech. I have blemishes too, you know? Yeah, me too. That's right. It's only natural. You guys are crazy. Elderly women stepped forward one by one, expressing their agreement. The voices of angry women filled the venue, causing a commotion. Simultaneously, memories of the time I had been labeled as a witch and mistreated flashed through my mind. thanks to the anger of these women in the venue. My pent-up frustration over the years felt somewhat relieved. The reason I have these blemishes is because I realized I was shouting at the top of my lungs. I think I was half crying, matching the volume of the bride's mother. The accumulation of emotions and pent-up feelings burst out at once, overwhelming my screams and emotions. It's because I supported both of you. I've been working every day, exposed to the sun, to make her a living, to make you happy. I hurled all the accumulated resentment I had towards my crouching husband and son. Then, Jenny spoke in a cold voice, looking down at my son. How pathetic! The bride contemptuously pierced my son with her eyes, his face already a mess from tears and mucus, due to the overwhelming pressure from the surroundings. I thought I couldn't see your mom because she wasn't feeling well, but it turns out it was because of this. You yourself know that the way you've treated your mother all this time is unforgivable, right? And you, Nicholas, is it? Who outright calls blemishes dirty? Seems to be even worse, in my opinion. Well, in the end, it's the same either way. My mother has more blemishes than your mother, you know. But my father says my mother's blemishes are a medal for supporting the family. Suddenly, I looked behind the bride and saw a man who seems to be the bride's father. He was a small man and spoke with a slightly embarrassed smile. Well, it's true, you know. Yeah, I love you, Dad, for being who you are. The bride looked down at my son again and spoke in a harsh tone. Blemishes and marks are not something to be ridiculed. They can be praised. As someone who was raised by my father and mother, I cannot tolerate such remarks. In response to her crystal clear anger, my son once again lowered his head. His head had already been scraped against the floor multiple times, and his forehead had turned red. With her clear voice resonating, she declared, "It's over. I'm glad we haven't submitted the marriage registration yet." Whoa, wait, it's not like that. My husband and son tried to protest, but Jenny firmly refused. I despise the bad witches in your heads. Well, the reception is now cancelled, but we will now proceed with the meal. After a brief talk from the bride, the MC announced it. A short applaud broke out in the venue, and everyone started returning to their seats. Your seat is also here, so please enjoy the meal. Jenny came over to me. I chose this venue because the food is really delicious. The bride smiled sweetly. I was mesmerized by her beauty and radiance. Especially the steak. It's delicious. Tears welled up in my eyes. I said to the bride, "Jenny, thank you. I wish I could have truly become your blood relative." Then, the bride's mother came over and laughed together with us. This must be fate. Let's exchange contact information. While enjoying a peaceful meal, I had various conversations with the bride's mother, Abby. My husband and son had disappeared from the venue as if fleeing. What surprised me at the reception was that Abby seemed to have made the bride's dress. Since I also enjoyed sewing, that unexpected hobby became a bond, and Abby and I remained friends. A few years later, Abby contacted me to inform that Jenny had found a marriage partner. Of course, I divorced my husband. I received a decent amount of compensation. And as for my son, Many people from his company attended the wedding. He could no longer stay in the company and left with his father, leaving this house. Thanks to that, I am enjoying my life as a single person gracefully. I no longer get ridiculed for being barefaced with blemishes and marks, and the absence of those insults truly brings relief. I realized how much of a source of stress that was, to the point where compensation doesn't seem enough. I can't help but feel responsible for my failure in raising my son, but I doubt I'll ever see him as long as I'm alive. When I am laid to rest, I want to leave these blemishes uncovered. Son, witness my brave final moments and regret when I'm gone. Hey, about Jenny's wedding dress? Huh? Abby, are you planning to make another one? By this time, Abby and I had become close friends. We visited each other's homes, sewed together, and watched movies together. She's once again challenging herself to make a wedding dress. She is truly an active person. I want to make it, but it's tough, and I want your help. Of course. Jenny is like a daughter to me, so I'm happy to help. Just then, Jenny came over with cookies and tea. We laughed together and enjoyed the cookies. Oh, this tea is delicious, right? They also have afternoon tea. So, why don't we go to the shop together next time, combining it with wedding planning? I smiled and wrote that plan in my schedule book.